for 1 second. Hey everybody, welcome to the vocabulary lesson. This is the 64 vocabulary lesson. Now we are on the vocabulary lesson 64. 64 vocabulary lesson. And now we're going to be talking about pandemic and epidemic. Pandemic is of a disease prevalent over a whole country or the world. Similar, widespread, prevalent, pervasive, rife, rampant, epidemic, universal, global, an outbreak of a pandemic disease. The results may have been skewed by an influenza pandemic occurring over a wide geographic area and affecting an exception high proportion of the population. Pandemic malaria. The 1918 flu was pandemic and claimed millions of lives. An outbreak of a disease that occurs over a wide geographic area and affects an exceptionally high proportion of the population. A pandemic outbreak of a disease. The coronavirus is causing a pandemic, and the pandemic is an emergency. Pandemic means a global virus that can be deadly. The U.S. now have people recovering from this pandemic. Pandemic means a causing disease of the whole world, an outbreak of a disease. Pandemic means effective and contamination. A pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease. And again, a pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease. And again, a pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease. And again, a pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease. And again, a pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease. One last time. A pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease. An influenza pandemic occurs when a new influenza virus emerges and spreads around the world. And most people do not have immunity. Viruses that have caused past pandemics typically originated from animal influenza viruses. Pandemic means an epidemic or illness that is worldwide. The coronavirus turned into a pandemic. Pandemic means occurring worldwide. The COVID-19 pandemic is worldwide. Pandemic means disease or illness that spreads the whole world. The world economy suffered as the pandemic crippled tourist and trade industry. Pandemic means a highly contagious illness that's widespread and causing problems. The coronavirus pandemic. Pandemic means an illness or disease happening over a broad area, same thing as a coronavirus. Coronavirus is a pandemic that takes thousands and thousands of people's lives, which leads to high death toll. A widespread occurrence of an infectious disease in a community at a particular time. A flu epidemic. Similar. Outbreak, plague, scourge, infestation, widespread illness, disease, pandemic, epizootic, recrudescence, never heard of that. RECRUDESCENCE, boutade, of the nature of an epidemic. Shoplifting has reached epidemic proportions. Similar words: rife, rampant, widespread, wide-ranging, extensive, sweeping, penetrating, pervading, global, universal, inescapable, ubiquitous, prevalent, predominant, endemic, pandemic, epizootic, opposite, limited, local. And then epidemic means a widespread occurrence. COVID-19 is an epidemic. Epidemic means an infectious disease or outbreak that occurs in a community. The epidemic spread throughout the country. Gosh, see, I gotta wear my mask. Over here. The epidemic spread throughout the country. Epidemic means it's a diseases in a community or widespread, different causes. The crowd was in a horrible epidemic at the news. Epidemic means a disease. There is an epidemic going around the world. Pandemic means a virus goes global. Pandemic means any disease that involves the whole world, kind of an emergency. Epidemic means when it's been increasing in cases of that disease. Pandemic means it's spreading around the world. Pandemic is an epidemic that is spread over the world, an outbreak of disease that spreads quickly and affects many individuals at the same time. An outbreak of epidemic disease. An outbreak or product of sudden rapid spread, growth, or development, an epidemic of bankruptcies. Epidemically is an adverb. Epidemicity is a noun. Epidemic, extremely prevalent, widespread, a temporary prevalence of a disease, a rapid spread or increase in the occurrence of something. An epidemic of riots, spreading rapidly and extensively by infection and affecting many individuals in an area or population at the same time as of a disease or illness. An outbreak or unusually high occurrence of a disease or illness in a population or area. Pandemic versus epidemic. What's the difference? Coronavirus was declared a global pandemic by the WHO. But what does that mean, and how is a pandemic different from an epidemic? One of those coronavirus words, they're kind of like adjectives. Number 1, coronavirus. Number 2, pandemic. Number 3, epidemic. Number 4, COVID-19. Number 5, corona. Number 6, virus. Here's the most information on my cell phone that I did a screenshot of it. So, I'm protecting my face from it because I don't want to have any germs with any other people because their germs are very contagious. The World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic because of the unusually fast rate in which the virus is spreading. The new coronavirus has infected more than 7 million people worldwide and has killed more than 400,000 people. But what's the difference between a pandemic and epidemic, and how does designated pandemic status impact COVID-19? What is an epidemic? An epidemic is an outbreak of a disease that spreads quickly and affects many people at the same time. An outbreak occurs when there is a sudden increase in the number of cases of a disease like COVID-19. It generally describes an increase that was not anticipated. An outbreak can occur in a community. geographical area or several countries. Epidemic is often used broadly to describe any problem that has grown out of control. During an epidemic, the disease is actively spreading. Examples of past epidemics are the 1918 Spanish flu, the measles outbreak from 1981 to 1991, and a 2014 case of whooping cough. Does coronavirus spread outside? What is a pandemic? A pandemic is a type of epidemic that relates to geographic spread and describes a disease that affects an entire country or the whole world. An epidemic becomes a pandemic when it spreads over significant geographical areas and affects a large percent of the population. In short, a pandemic is an epidemic on a national or global level. Examples of past pandemics are the flu pandemic of 1968, the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and the bubonic plague. How is a pandemic different? Number one, affects a wider geographical area, often worldwide. Number two, infects a larger number of people. Number three, often caused by a new virus or a new strain of virus that has not circulated within people for a long time. Number four, humans have little to no immunity against the virus and it spreads quickly. Number five, causes more deaths. Number six, often creates social disruption and economic loss. The terms pandemic and epidemic are never used to indicate the severity of the disease, only the degree at which the disease is spreading. Face mask, how to wear, remove and make your own. This is my face mask right here that I was wearing a few minutes ago. Why declare a pandemic? Declaring a pandemic allows a national and global public health agencies to respond to the situation at a higher degree. The use of the term also highlights the importance of countries working together in the effort to control the pandemic. More than anything, declaring a pandemic works to raise awareness about the problem and increase measures to control it. Learn the differences between COVID-19 and the flu. Coronavirus pandemic status. COVID-19 is declared a pandemic because of the speed at which it has spread globally. The World Health Organization declares COVID-19 to be a controllable pandemic and continues to provide advice on precautionary practices and ways to stop the spread of the disease. Learn more about COVID-19 by visiting our resource page. Alright, folks. That's it. The lesson is over. Pandemic and epidemic. It has something to do about the diseases and stuff.